The three homages. Buddham Saranam Gacchami Dhammam Saranam Gacchami Sangam Saranam Gacchami. Zensho Kada. Zensho mi dani udojo ui igu ugon oji Kanon Seishi Jinja Shu Jubu Joke Ra Ini May the spiritual presence of Amida Buddha, Kannon, and Seishi Bodhisattvas, and all enlightened ones, past, present, and future, permeate this hall to send forth wisdom like flower petals falling from the sky to awaken those of us gathered. To you all, thank you so much for being here today. It means a lot to Kathy and her family. We have come together today to honor our dear friend, father, grandfather, Stephen Phillip Riordan. we gather in this very important moment to acknowledge his transition and rebirth. Rebirth in the land of bliss, manifested by the primal vow of Amida Buddha over 5 kalpas ago. Steve is welcomed there by Amida, the Buddha of infinite wisdom and compassion. He will find peace in the realm of joy and insight with no obstacles to understanding. Rebirth there ends the long cycle of births and deaths. It relieves all suffering. It awakens the Buddha nature inside all of us. Steve is not suffering. Amida's grace extends to all sentient beings. May Steve easily transition to the Pure Land, and may Amida Buddha's embrace of compassion and wisdom hold him safe. We will now have the benediction presented by his wife, Kathy.
I want to say, first of all, thank you for everyone who's come today. I really appreciate your coming to honor Steve and his life and his passing at this point. Steve Riordan was the center of my life. He was the joy, the happiness, and the energy in our home. He was my friend, my protector, my rock. He could make me laugh until I peed my pants. We would talk about everything: politics, religion, current events, the normal mundane life in our home, yard work, how much we both hated pulling weeds once spring hit. And even though at times we would not agree, we would at least listen to each other. Anyone who spent any time with Steve realized how much he could talk on almost any subject. And he did like talking with people. He could make a friend out of a complete stranger, which he did quite often on our travels together. We both enjoyed taking train trips, and he would head to the observation car, not so much to watch the scenery, but to sit and talk with the people in there. We met when we both worked at the Flamingo Hilton, and by chance, both lived in Ross Manor, a rooming house that was right around the corner. Steve always had a great sense of humor, was good at his job, and was well liked by the people he worked with. He worked in the IT department, or as it was called in those days, data processing. When he would call to see if I wanted to join him for lunch, my heart would go up a bit, in a good way, just seeing data processing on the caller ID. He was the one who would handle computer issues throughout the casino and the hotel. Since I worked at the hotel front desk, we encountered each other very often, which is how we became friends, and eventually, over the years, grew to love each other and built our life together. We helped raise his 3 children, Thomas, Daniel, and Lindsay. We weren't the best parents, but we did what we could to help them have a stable life. Although we did have a rough time during those years, I like to think that Thomas, Lindsay, and Daniel and I are close friends now. Steve and I, along with the triplets, raised numerous cats and dogs, had the joy of laughing at their antics and their different quirky personalities, and shared the sorrow of their passing. Steve was a very restless person. He moved from job to job frequently, like he couldn't quite figure out what he wanted out of life. He tried his hand at writing, artwork, music, computer programming, and taking classes both online and at TMCC, but could never quite commit to any one topic for any length of time. Hopefully, as he moves into his new existence, he will find his calling. Steve was born here in Reno at St. Mary's Hospital. Both his mom and dad worked in the casinos as blackjack dealers. He grew up on West 7th Street in a neighborhood on a street called Casa Loma, if anybody knows that area. He went to Clayton Middle School, Reno High, and Minogue High. He didn't graduate, being basically bored with school, and went on to join the Coast Guard at 17 years old. While in the Coast Guard, he did get his GED. He was originally based in Honolulu, Hawaii, where his ship would patrol the Pacific up to the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska. He was then transferred to a search and rescue station on Belle Isle outside Detroit, Michigan, where he was a dispatcher for boats rescuing people on the Detroit River. Steve did not stay in the Coast Guard after his initial enlistment period. He came home to Reno, where he struggled to find a decent job. He eventually joined the Air National Guard and was sent to Biloxi, Mississippi for electronic warfare training. This training was something that intrigued him, and he was so good at the class that he would tutor other Air Guardsmen. The military wanted him to stay in the Guard and become an instructor, but that would mean his staying in Biloxi, Mississippi. If anyone has been to the South, you can understand why this was not some place where he wanted to live. He decided to leave the Air Guard when his enlistment was up and again came back home to Reno. Learning electronics in the military spiked his interest in the newly emerging field of computers, which fascinated him. He worked at TMCC as a teaching assistant and then moved on to work in the IT department of various casinos. Today, I would like everyone to remember the Steve that each one of us knew. Remember his sense of humor, his kindness, his tolerance, his wealth of knowledge, as well as his cynicism and often stated opinions. I'm sure each one of you has a memory of your own, of your interaction with my husband. I love Steve. I still love him, and have been very blessed to have had him in my life. And thank you all for being here.
We will now chant the sutra called the Sansege. And as the priests chant this, you are welcome to come up and offer incense at this altar here. And it's just an offering to tell Steve how grateful you are for his life and to ease his transition onward. And you just take a little pinch of the incense in the bowl there and place it on the charcoal. And then send him a good wish. The Sutra of Three Vows is an expression of the Bodhisattva Kanon's determination to work for the liberation of all sentient beings. Kathy and her family will go first, and others will follow. Sansege. Gagon shosegan. Hishimu jodo shigan fumanzo. Seifun josho ga o muryoko. Fui dai seishu. Fusai shobingu. Seifu josho ga nankujin shonen joe shubongyo shigumu jodo isho tenin shi jiniki endai ko fusho musaido shoujo sankumyo kosai shuyakunan kai hi chi egen meshi 足小悪道津田全宗門高僧上満蔵伊予路寺票日月修十期東音普賢日宗異種解放像公正独法上大衆樹聖表四式供養異細部具足習特本観念市場満特異三害を女部無下地つらに不詳感覚営力投資最小損志願や国家外戦を感動国書とうちんよげナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブがんにしくどく平等聖祭道本菩提心お嬢安らほWe will now have a reading called On White Ashes, read by Patty Chaffee.
First of all, I was honored to be Steve's sister-in-law. I'll be reading White Ashes by Riordan Shonen. When we deeply contemplate the transient nature of human life, we realize that from beginning to end, Life is impermanent like an illusion. We have not yet heard of anyone who lived 200 years. How fleeting is a lifetime? Who in this world today can maintain a human form for even 100 years? There is no knowing whether I will die first or others, whether death will occur today or tomorrow. We depart one after another, more quickly than the dewdrops on the roots or the tips of the blades of grasses, so it is said. We may have radiant faces in the morning, but by evening we may turn into white ashes. Once the winds of impermanence have blown, our eyes are instantly closed and our breath stops forever. Then our radiant face changes its color, and the attractive countenance like peach and plum blossoms is lost. Family and relatives will gather and grieve, but all to no avail. Since there is nothing else to be done, the deceased are carried out to the fields, and then what is left after the body has been cremated and has turned into the midnight smoke is just white ashes. Words fail to describe the sadness of it all. Thus, the ephemeral nature of human existence is such that death comes to young and old alike without discrimination. We must all quickly take to heart the matter of the greatest importance, the spiritual life. Entrust ourselves deeply to Amida Buddha, the wisdom and compassion of this universe, and offer the Nimbutsu. Humbly and respectfully, Rinyo Shonen.
We will now have a meditation time and listen to Claire de Lune, which was a favorite of Steve's. He specially selected this. So please just relax, close your eyes, and think of Steve.
I knew Steve around the temple. He'd come and help when we needed an extra set of hands, or I'd see him at dinners, different times. He was always a funny guy, but then sometimes he was a funny guy. But I was happy to see him, and he was always kind to me. I think he was a deep thinker. I think he, regardless of the moving around and not quite finding what that one thing was, he was always interested in the philosophy or in the meaning in things and searching. I saw that. We had nice talks from time to time. It seemed like he loved quoting Shakespeare. He'd have deep discussions with people, make people laugh. He had a very dry sense of humor. His illness really frustrated him. An active life does not prepare us for feeling weak and unable and hurting. The last time I talked with Steve, we shared our favorite Monty Python lines, and from those silly movies, we laughed just about how crazy life was and how the unexpected does happen. I think Steve kept laughing right to the end because he just had a good sense of humor. In the Buddhist view, death is the dissolution of what makes us up, these 5 aggregates of form, sensation, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. The causes and conditions of Steve's life here have ceased. Now we focus on his next birth in Amida Buddha's Pure Land, a land of ease, clarity, and understanding. With the help of Amida's attendant, the dear Bodhisattva Kanon, he is guided onward. He passes through the otherwise difficult and confusing stage of the bardo or the doorway state after 49 days, and then the next home of the mind stream that we knew as Steve is determined. It will be easy and simple for him with Kanon by his side. He's okay. He will not experience the transition as confusion. Instead, we know in our hearts that the compassion of the Buddha will immediately guide him to the Jodo, or the Western Pure Land. There he will have birth one more time. There he can see clearly reality as it is, probably what he was seeking and looking for, the meaning he was looking for in this life. And then he will be able to direct his birth back to these 6 realms. Here he will be uniquely equipped to help sentient beings finally escape the cycle of births and deaths. His suffering gave him precious insight into the pain of others. His life experience will benefit countless sentient beings in the future. Namanos. Now we have a time for personal reflections. I think we'll start with Jeff. And I'm not sure if Steve would have wanted us to do the open mic thing because sometimes people can get a little kooky, but we'll see.
First thing, I'm honored to be asked to speak today, and from the Chaffee and Williams family. Thank you, Aunt Kathy. We've all talked and come up with some things, and when I asked my mom to tell me what she thinks when Steve's name is mentioned, she said the first thing that comes to mind is intelligent, followed by irreverent, cynical, facetious, and funny. but also a person who really listened when you talked and was truly interested in hearing why you believed the things you said. Plus, Steve could always be counted on for sage advice when asked. Mom ended her comments by saying the most important thing she will remember about Steve is that he was the person who kept her sister Kathy safe, happy, grounded for the last almost 23 years. For that, she said she'll always be grateful for the time we had Steve in our lives. There's one basic trait I think that always came up when we talked about Steve, and that's his ability to listen to you when you're talking to him or telling a story. And I think he would absorb it like a sponge, and he would be able to talk to you about it afterwards because he was listening. I know many times he would question me about things years later and say, "Hey, do you still believe this? You still think that? Wow, you were paying attention." That was great. But the one thing I think stands out the most is when Steve was telling stories. He had such a vivid memory of places he was, what car he was driving, the time, the day, the song that was playing, and mixed in with his animations, if he's talking about riding a motorcycle, he's doing that, or flying an airplane, his hands are going, and if he's surfing or whatever. Making love, no, just kidding. That never came up. Oh, but it's a testament to how much he actually paid attention to things and people. And that's what I'm going to remember personally. I think hopefully he was like that to everybody, paid attention. His wit and his sense of humor is not going to be forgotten. Love you.
We'll have Ed come up now.
Hello, thank you for having me, Kathy, family. Steve was a good friend of mine, and we worked together through Arrow and then through Sage. Oftentimes we would sit on the bench outside and definitely talk about politics and whatever else came up. Steve was a very social bird. He liked to go around and talk to people all the time. I'd be working in the server department, and I'd look up and he'd be over talking to somebody else. But he definitely liked to talk to people. And Steve got sick. He kind of related to me. I had cancer, and I survived it, and he kind of wanted to know what to expect and what would happen. And although my cancer wasn't the same as his, he still wanted to know. And I tried to give him my experience going through cancer. And unfortunately, I didn't have to have chemo. They caught my cancer in time. So I didn't have to I just had surgery. But as he went through his stages and fighting the cancer, I felt for him. I couldn't, help him any further. And in time, Steve slowly faded away from work and going through this chemotherapy and this sickness. I tried to Rob's here, okay. I try to get him out more and go to coffee or breakfast and, do things together. And Rob was there too. Thank you, Rob. I'm sad for Steve's passing. He's greatly missed. Thank you.
And his daughter, Lindsay.
Dad was able to come home in his final days. It was one of his last wishes, to spend his final moments at home in comfort, surrounded by family and his beloved dogs. That evening, he came home in hospice. I sat with Dad and held his hand. He looked me in the eyes and, in classic Steve form, recited Hamlet's "To be or not to be." Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against seas of trouble, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep. No more, and by a sleep to say, we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. When we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity so long of life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's harsh language, the pangs of unvalued love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the abuse that men with great accomplishments receive from men with none, when he himself his death make with a bare thick needle? Who would bear burdens to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose boundary no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than to fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution causes nausea and lack of vigor, with the pale cast of thought and enterprises of great essence, with great regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. When he finished reciting all of this, to be or not to be, he said, I love Kathy, and I love you and the boys. I'm happy my 2 kids are here with me. These were some of his last words in the last conversation he had. That night, he fell into a peaceful slumber to never wake again.
Let's share a special wish for dear Steve. Let's focus all of our goodwill on his behalf. Please repeat after me. May you be happy. May you be happy. May you be free from harm. May you be free from harm. May you receive boundless compassion. May you receive boundless compassion. And may peace and harmony fill your heart. And may peace and harmony fill your heart. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you. That concludes our memorial service for Steve. We will have Kathy come up to the altar, and we will place his tablet at our memorial altar. Shall we resume the, I can't say the name, Scheherazade. Doesn't look like that to me. Scheherazade.
Steve picked it.
Kathy just explained the meaning of the song to us so that we could understand why he picked it. Very interesting.